She stood alone at the back of the briefing tent, ignored again. But what came next, no one expected. They talked like she wasn't there. Inside the dim canvas shelter, humming with radios and tension. Names were called, men nodded, a silence. Given, Operation Red Sand was go. Bella Carson stayed quiet in the back corner. One hand wrapped around the weathered notebook she never let out of her sight. Her pale blue eyes tracked every map, every grid coordinate. Not because she'd been asked, because she couldn't help it, because she knew, without a doubt, that whoever they were sending wasn't going to be good enough. And she was right, but no one asked her. She wasn't invisible. She was worse than that. She was seen, just not believed in, out on Firebase Horizon. Mornings started with the sharp scent of diesel and dust. Helicopters sliced the air. Convoys rumbled like distant thunder. War moved in patterns, predictable, mechanical, but inside Bella, something didn't move at all. It waited, still, coiled. She was 23 years old, Swedish, her uniform spotless, her rifle always cleaner than regulation required. No one ever caught her unprepared. They just refused to call her, 8 months in, and still support roles, logistics, maintenance. She fixed. Scopes that men would use, polished barrels that wouldn't be hers, ran calculations others would ignore. Every shot she'd ever taken, every record she still held back in Sweden meant nothing here. You could almost laugh. Her father, Lars Carlson, would have laughed. Not at her, but at the absurdity. He'd been a legend. A sniper with 28 confirmed kills and 0 ego. He once told Bella when she was 15 that real shooters don't talk. They just wait for a moment that matters, and then they show up. She'd taken that to heart. But now, it was starting to feel like maybe that moment would never come. At the center of command, Lieutenant Colonel Anderson shuffled papers like the outcome was already written. He read off scores. Hers were top tier. Her physical training reports flawless. Her marksmanship unmatched. But he always had a but. Practical considerations, he said. She could carry her gear farther than some of the men. Had outscored every sniper in the European coalition on every range. She'd never failed a test, never asked for special treatment, never raised her voice, but still logistics. Not enough muscle, too much risk. Team cohesion, politics, gender dynamics, international image. They called it policy. She called it fear. She didn't cry. Not then. Not ever in uniform. But alone, out at the far fence line where the desert bled into the horizon, she let herself feel the weight of what wasn't happening. The truth burned in her chest. She wasn't angry because she wasn't trusted. She was angry because they were wrong. Wrong about what mattered. Wrong about what was possible. Wrong about her. And one day, someone was going to pay the cost for that mistake. But there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Every night, while the base powered down and the desert cooled, Bella trained, not just push-ups or dry fires. She'd built an entire hidden regimen. Clandestine long-range drills. Precision memory exercises. Physics models she developed herself. Sometimes on scrap paper by flashlight, she tracked moonlight, terrain gradients, heat shimmer patterns off old steel wrecks. She knew the range from the abandoned watchtower to the far ridge. 3,100 meters. Exactly. She knew because she'd practiced. That shot, over and over, silently. To anyone watching, she was just a logistics girl. Good with optics. Better with numbers. But under the skin, she was steel. She could feel it now, something shifting. A whisper through the ranks. A convoy, ambushed. A sniper hit one of their armored trucks from 2,500 meters out. Unheard of, that night. Bella reviewed the trajectory and location and wrote out the probable weapon system, angle of fire, and likely shooter elevation. Before intelligence even made their first guess. She turned it in. They thanked her, then locked her access tighter. Excellence had become suspicious. Why did brilliance threaten them so much? She knew the answer, even if they didn't say it. because if they let her in, they'd have to admit they'd been wrong, and wrong meant risking the illusion of control. And if she succeeded, it wouldn't just be her win, it would be their shame. She stopped asking for a place on the missions. She just prepared like she was already on them. She logged the terrain for every sector in a 10-kilometer radius, memorized distances between landmarks, wrote contingency firing plans for every convoy route, every potential evac point, every place a Delta Force team might go silent and need a ghost on the ridge to pull them back from the edge. She even calculated extreme-range wind shift tables for sniper shots no one had attempted in decades. Some called it obsession. She called it readiness. Then came Operation Iron Eagle. Hostage rescue, urban overwatch. 1,400 meters. Thompson got the sniper role. Thompson, who'd failed the same physical test Bella passed with ease. Mission success? Technically, but not precision. She watched the body cam footage, later saw the 3-second delay between exposure and engagement. Calculated how faster support could have reduced risk. She said nothing, kept her head down, cleaned his rifle after, and added a new variable to her personal sniper algorithm: institutional blindness. But she also started to sense something deeper. The system wasn't built to see people like her, and maybe it never would unless something broke. Unless something forced them to see. She didn't know when that moment would come, but when it did, she'd be ready. She had to be. Because if that moment came, and she wasn't, then maybe they'd been right all along. Why was her name never on the list? Even when the mission screamed her skill set, Bella stopped expecting answers. Operation Blue Moon had been textbook urban tight angles, reflective surfaces, hostages in motion, the kind of environment she'd trained in for years back in Stockholm, where wind tunnels and glass towers taught shooters how to think in ricochets. Not just lines, she had the background, the calculations, the calm. Thompson got the call again. Same result, technically a win. But Bella saw the margin, the near misses, the ricochet that could have killed a hostage if not for pure luck. Luck wasn't a tactic, but it seemed to be the one the system trusted more than her. She stayed late that night, rechecking Thompson's rifle. It was off barely, scope shift of 2 milliradians. Just enough to matter at 1,200 meters. She adjusted it without saying a word. Not to help him, but because she couldn't stand sloppy math. Bella didn't want recognition anymore. She wanted readiness. She wanted the mission that no one could survive except her. Her notes were growing darker, more precise, more predictive. She wasn't just planning to snipe. She was building battlefield models, forecasting failure points. What would happen if an extraction bird failed in Sector North? How long would it take ground support to reach a pin team if roads were compromised? How far can insurgent snipers hit if they were using second-hand Western optics? She plotted it all, and then she started building answers, silent answers, illicit ones. The abandoned outpost east of Horizon looked like nothing. That's what made it perfect. Old steel, cracked concrete, forgotten by everyone but her. Bella turned it into her chapel, her altar of proof, at night. She moved through shadows with practiced ease, her breath shallow, steps memorized. Her hidden cache held everything she needed. A modified M24 she'd tuned beyond spec, match grade. Rounds she'd requisitioned piece by piece. Even a custom algorithm on a handheld device for real-time atmospheric compensation, illegal? Maybe life-saving? Absolutely. The target markers weren't dummies. They were real rusted vehicles left from earlier campaigns. Burned out of PCs, twisted frames. Markers she'd mapped to the centimeter. Each shot logged in her journal. Data. Impact radius, wind drift, shot delay. Some of the shots were past 3,000 meters. Not theory, not dream. Fact, if anyone had seen her groupings, they'd have thought it was computer-generated. But she never told a soul. When did preparation become something to hide? The answer she realized was simple when it embarrassed the system, because her calculations weren't supposed to exist. Her drills, her scores, they didn't fit the doctrine. She wasn't trained to be this good, and if she was, then why wasn't she deployed? No one wanted to ask that question, because no one wanted the answer. The real insult came quietly. It was just a whisper in the mess tent, low enough that it could have been missed. Where's she getting all this info? Feels a little weird. Brad Coleman, logistics backbone. 8 years in, steady, respectable, and suspicious. The problem wasn't Bella's skills. It was that she had them without permission. The rumors began. She noticed eyes on her during briefings. Less friendly now, less curious. Her bullet recommendations were second-guessed. Her map work reviewed, her reports rechecked by officers she'd outscored in every drill. One afternoon, Captain Mitchell called her into his office. Just a routine. "Check-in," he said. It wasn't. "Where are you learning this?" he asked, eyes calm but probing. "The range of your knowledge, it's beyond your role." Bella said what she always said. Competitive shooting, self-study, curiosity. "Curiosity is good," Mitchell replied. "But unmonitored expertise creates complications." Complications. That word stuck with her more than anything else. She wasn't a risk because she was bad. She was a risk because she was better than they could explain. Soon, excellence became evidence. Her access narrowed. Her tasks monitored. She wasn't reprimanded. That would have required a violation. She was contained. When she spoke, it echoed. Not because the room was empty, but because no one wanted to be the one who listened. Not if it meant believing in something unapproved. And then came the meeting. Anderson again. Formal this time. Folder on the desk. Her name in bold. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just redefined her. Too much initiative. Too many extracurricular activities. Unauthorized modifications. Unrequested intelligence work. "You're a logistics specialist." He said. "Not an analyst. Not a marksman. Not a sniper. Stay in your lane." That was the message. But some roads don't have lanes. Some just lead to the cliff. Bella nodded like a good soldier. Took the scolding. Promised to scale back. Then she went back to her bunk and updated her calculations for a worst-case scenario in the Northern Valley. Because deep down, she knew the system wasn't just flawed. It was fragile, and fragile things break under pressure. That night, she cleaned her rifle with hands that didn't shake, even though she knew what might be coming, even though she knew that readiness without trust would never be enough. But maybe that was the point. If the only way to make them see was to do the unthinkable, then she was going to wait for the moment the unthinkable arrived. And when it did, she'd meet it with breath held, scope aligned, and heart steady. Because someone had to be ready when the ones they trusted weren't. Why do systems always fail right before the moment they're needed most? The alarm hit at 3:47. Not the drill kind. The real kind. The kind that cuts the air like a scalpel and makes everyone move like they've already seen the worst. Bella was up before her boots hit the floor. By the time she reached the command center, the screens were lit in red. Voices everywhere, radios barking, Major Harrison at the center, jaw clenched, sweat on his brow. Delta Force Team Bravo trapped, high value. Intel op, northern sector, extraction chopper downed, no air support. Snipers on the ridge pinning them in. Bella froze, not because she was afraid, because she knew that terrain. She'd mapped it in her head 100 times. Knew the elevations, the fallback positions, the sniper lanes. She also knew something else. No one in theater could make those shots. No one, but her webcam on comes. "I'm in position." "Sir, but the range is beyond effective engagement. I can suppress, but I can't guarantee hits." Bella felt it in her chest, that familiar hollow drop. She closed her eyes, already calculating angles. Wind curves. Terrain drift. 2,900 meters. Too far for web, Too far for any standard marksman. Anderson scanned the room for solutions. There has to be someone in the theater coalition partners. Anyone trained for these distances? The room was silent. Everyone already knew the answer. No, there was no one. That's when she spoke. Sir, I can make those shots. It was quiet when she said it. No anger, no ego, just truth. Everyone turned. The radio continued, Team Bravo's voice crackling with urgency. Gunfire in the background. Desperation climbing. And still, the room stared at Bella like she'd said something unbelievable. Like they'd forgotten everything she'd already. Proven. Harrison blinked. What did you say, Specialist? She didn't flinch. I can make those shots, sir. I've done the calculations. I've trained for this exact scenario. I can neutralize the snipers and clear the path for Bravo's escape. Anderson stepped forward, his voice cut like a blade. Carlson, you are not authorized for precision sniper deployment. You are not cleared for combat ops. Your assignment is equipment support. With respect, sir, she replied, eyes locked. My assignment is irrelevant if the people qualified to save that team can't do it. I can. The seconds ticked. You could feel the room shifting, tilting between doctrine and necessity. Mitchell spoke next. Even if your shooting scores are accurate, there's no precedent for this. No field experience, no clearance. This would be completely irregular. Bella reached into her bag, pulled out her notebook, weathered, overfilled, heavy with equations and field diagrams. These are firing solutions for Sector North. All 3 sniper positions. Range, elevation, wind profiles, temperature gradients, atmospheric pressure corrections. Every variable accounted for. Anderson's face darkened. You were ordered to cease unauthorized tactical analysis. And there it was. Not, you're wrong. Not, you can't do it. Just, you weren't supposed to. Bravo came through again. We're down to 60 rounds, 2 casualties. If support doesn't arrive in 12 minutes, we won't make extraction. Bella heard it, what everyone else refused to accept. This wasn't a decision anymore. It was a reckoning. Sir, she said, turning to Harrison again, quieter now. You're not risking lives by sending me. You're risking lives by not sending me. Harrison didn't answer right away, because how do you say yes to someone the system said no to? Even when they're the only one who can make the difference? I understand your confidence, he said finally, but we can't justify the risk. Not with no precedent, no clearance, no field command oversight. Bella nodded, then turned. I understand. She walked out of the command center, every step echoing off walls that had been built to keep her out. But not one of them saw her hand clench. Not one of them knew that she wasn't walking away from the mission. She was walking toward it. Her mind was already racing. To minus 11 minutes, she had a ridgeline, 28 kilometers out. From there, she'd have line of sight on all 3 sniper nests. She had her gear hidden. Her modified rifle, her rangefinder, her ballistics computer, every piece of equipment she wasn't supposed to have. She designed it for this moment. The impossible moment. Back in her quarters, she stared at her hands. Small, steady, forgotten by the institution, but about to become the only thing standing between survival and slaughter. No one would authorize her. No one would back her. So she'd have to back herself. She opened her notebook to the familiar pages. The angles, the notes, her father's words, echoed in her head. Every shot carries more than metal, it carries responsibility. She took a breath. Then she loaded her gear, snuck out of her quarters, and disappeared into the pre-dawn shadows. They thought she'd given up. They were wrong. She was about to prove why some rules were meant to be broken, and why the only thing more dangerous than a forgotten soldier was a ready one. How do you walk toward history knowing it might destroy you? She moved through the darkness with steps she'd rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times. Past the fuel depot, left at the supply yard's shadowed fence, 3 clicks east to the ridge. No one saw her. Not because she was invisible, but because no one believed she'd ever do it. The command center thought she'd obeyed. They thought she was sitting quietly, accepting her limits, letting the qualified ones handle it. But Bella Carlson had never been more disobedient or more prepared. She reached the old outpost just before the horizon began to bleed orange. Time: 4:11. 5 minutes until Team Bravo's desperate move. She had 1 minute to set up, 1 minute to stabilize, 1 minute to breathe. Then everything would begin. Her rifle was already assembled. A modified M24 with extended barrel and hand-loaded rounds so precise she could tell their grain weight. By feel, the scope, tuned for ridiculous distances. The rangefinder, calibrated for 4,000 meters. The software, hers, everything she needed, but wasn't supposed to have, because no one thought she was allowed to be this good. She lay prone, nestled into the stone, hidden from enemy view and her own command. She checked her first target, 3,127 meters, partially obscured, tucked behind rock. Only a sliver of the upper body visible. No clean line of fire. To most, it was impossible. To Bella, it was just math. She inhaled, adjusted wind drift by 4 mils, accounted for humidity and air density, factored in Coriolis effect. Yes, the Earth rotation. Every variable known. Bravo 6, initiating movement to extraction point in 90 seconds. Requesting immediate overwatch. Her fingers settled on the trigger. The cold metal against her skin didn't shake. Her heartbeat didn't spike. This was her church, and the shot her prayer. She exhaled slowly, squeezed. The bullet flew for 42 seconds. 4 seconds of silence. 4 seconds where physics, time, and destiny collided. Then, the enemy sniper collapsed, dropped backward, weapon clattering. Bella blinked once. Not in shock, in confirmation, 1 down, 2 more to go. Team Bravo was moving. She could hear it in their cums panting, stress, the sound of boots pounding dust. The second sniper was higher, 3,290 meters better. Position, easier escape routes, but he didn't know he was exposed from one single angle. An angle Bella had memorized. From this ridge, from this spot, she shifted, dialed windage, waited for thermal distortion to settle. Bravo is 30 seconds from open ground. Repeat, 30 seconds from open ground. She didn't respond. She just fired. Shot. 2. 36 seconds. A heartbeat faster than the last. Time stretched like rubber. She followed the flight. Watched the target twitch, then drop. 2 down. Bravo 6. We're clear past the South Tree line, moving now. Sniper fire has ceased on both sides. Not quite. There was still one more. The third sniper had the best concealment. No movement, no outline. Just suspicion. But Bella had studied that terrain 100 times. She knew where he would be, knew the best angle for suppressive cover. She calculated it like breath work, 3,412 meters. The longest shot, the riskiest, the kind that made her father's record look like a warm-up. She shifted her body, angled her hips just slightly for alignment, and whispered something she hadn't spoken aloud since childhood. Make it count. Shot 3, 46 seconds. This one felt different, not because of doubt, but because she knew what it meant. If she missed, Bravo might never make it to extraction. If she hit, then everything they said about her, all the dismissals, all the restrictions, would become lies. The bullet landed. She didn't need to see it. She felt it. Stillness. No movement. From the ridge, no fire. Nothing. 3 shots. 3 dead snipers. Bravo alive. Overlord. This is Bravo 6. No more fire from the ridgeline. Repeat. Sniper threat appears neutralized. How copy? Static. Then Harrison's voice stunned. Copy that. Bravo 6. Proceed to extraction. Air support is inbound for evac. There was a pause. Then someone said it quietly in the command center. How the hell? Bella didn't stay to watch. She packed her gear, tucked the modified components back into their cache, wiped down the stone. She moved like she hadn't just changed everything. But she had, because when she returned to base, the first light of dawn wasn't the only thing breaking. A system had broken too, and it had broken because of her. Why did walking back feel heavier than the shot itself? Bella's footsteps were slow, deliberate, even as the adrenaline still curled like smoke in her blood. The rifle slung across her shoulder was lighter than it had ever felt, and yet her chest was heavier, not from fear. From knowing exactly what was coming, she had done what no one else could. She had saved lives, and now she would pay for it. The base was just starting to stir. Morning routines, breakfast prep, the smell of coffee mixing with the distant roar of aircraft. No one knew what she'd done. Not yet, but they would. And when they did, some would cheer. Others would call it betrayal. Because she hadn't just broken orders, she had broken expectations. She had broken the rules that kept people like her small and silent. She cleaned her rifle slowly, the way a violinist might polish a string after the concert of their life, gentle, reverent. The weapon that had ended 3 threats at over 3,000 meters would now go back to sitting in the armory. Anonymous, just another tool stripped of context. Unless someone changed that. Unless they changed, the knock came 10 minutes later. Not frantic, not pounding, just official, measured. She opened the door. Lieutenant Colonel Anderson, Major Harrison. A third man she didn't recognize, older, decorated, quiet. Bella stepped back without a word. They didn't scold her, not at first. They sat. Anderson looked tired. Harrison looked conflicted. The third man? He looked curious. "We need to discuss your actions this morning," Anderson said, voice stiff. Bella waited. Let them speak. Let them try to define it before she did. Harrison cleared his throat. "Our analysis confirms that the sniper positions threatening Team Bravo were neutralized by extreme-range precision fire, fired from a location we had previously deemed tactically inaccessible." He looked at her now. The range, the angles, the calculations. "Carlson, that was you, wasn't it?" She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She just said, "Yes, sir. No excuses, no apologies. No need to prove what physics had already confirmed. 3 shots, 3 lives ended. To save 12, 3 moments that rewrote everything." The third officer leaned forward. "Colonel Richards, Divisional Command," he said simply. "What I don't understand is how you developed these capabilities without official training. The skill you demonstrated this morning, it goes far beyond what we expected, even hoped from someone in your role." Bella opened her notebook and placed it gently on the table. She let them turn the pages. Months of data, angles, wind speeds, calculations that rivaled doctoral dissertations in complexity. She explained her background, competitive shooting, her father's legacy, her nightly training, her unauthorized ballistic software. She didn't brag. She just told the truth and let the math speak louder than anything else. Anderson looked stunned. Harrison looked regretful. Richards looked impressed. "You violated multiple regulations," Anderson finally said, his voice quieter now. "What you did, if documented officially, would be grounds for court-martial." Bella said nothing. She didn't argue, because she'd already made peace with that cost. But what came next shocked her. "But," Richard said, carefully, "we're not here to bury you, because you also saved lives. Lives we had no plan to save." He looked around the room, then back at her. "Which means the problem isn't what you did. It's that we didn't see the need to let you do it sooner." There was silence, not awkward, just weighty. Like the pause before something important, Richards continued. "We're recommending immediate reassignment to sniper training. Full clearance, advanced equipment, tactical leadership training. Your capabilities should have been developed months ago. That failure's on us." Bella exhaled for the first time since sunrise. But there was no relief in her eyes, only stillness, still waiting to believe it. "And your weapon modifications," Harrison added, flipping through her notebook. Some of this is genuinely innovative. We're forwarding it to R&D. You might have just improved every sniper unit in the coalition." Bella looked down at her hands, at the same fingers they once said were too small for real combat. She didn't cry, not because it wasn't emotional, but because this wasn't a gift, it was a correction. A system course-correcting under the undeniable weight of her reality. They left her alone with the silence and the stillness and the rifle. She no longer had to hide, and for the first time, she allowed herself a thought she'd never dared believe. They're going to let me do what I was born to do. How do you step into the light when you've spent years building yourself in the dark? 3 months later, Bella stood at the center of the same tent where she'd once been invisible. Now, when she spoke, people listened. No more glances, no more polite nods. No more, "We'll take it from here." She briefed the room. Projected maps, atmospheric data, target positions at extreme distances. The engagement range in Sector 12 is between 2,800 and 3,400 meters. Terrain is high desert, minimal cover. Optimal wind conditions at 1,400 hours. I've already calculated firing solutions. Silence then. Understood, Sergeant Carlson. Not specialist, not logistics. Sergeant, sniper, lead. The change hadn't come all at once, even after Bravo's rescue. There had been resistance. Some still called it luck. Others whispered about how dangerous it was to reward insubordination. But slowly, quietly, reality eroded doubt. Because every test they gave her, she surpassed. Every barrier they removed. Only to find she had already trained beyond it. Her first official sniper course? She taught parts of it by the end. They brought her in to learn. She became the one they learned from. Captain Williams, her new spotter, had been skeptical at first. Former recon, decorated, dead serious. He watched her hit a target at 2,200 meters on a windy day, adjusted for spin drift without the computer, and didn't speak for 2 minutes. After that, he never questioned her again. But what haunted Bella wasn't the mission briefs or the accolades. It was how close it had come to being wasted if Delta Force hadn't been pinned. If Webb had hit his mark, if she'd stayed in her room, obeyed orders, they'd still call her logistics. The best sniper in the European coalition, still wiping down other people's scopes. Sometimes, systems change because they want to. Other times, they change because they're forced to. Because someone stands up in the middle of failure and says, "No more." Bella didn't need recognition. She didn't need a ceremony. She just needed the rifle. And a reason to fire it. And now, for the first time, they were giving her both. Her equipment was no longer hidden in a cache or smuggled out under cover of darkness. Now it came in a sealed case. Military issued, signed, stamped. She opened it like it was an old friend. Inside, a custom-built M201 OESR, laser rangefinder, atmospheric sensors. Her requested modifications had all been approved. She ran her fingers over the barrel. Everything she'd once built alone, now made official, but that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was what the patch on her shoulder meant. Not sniper, not shooter. Trusted. The days were long now, not just training, but teaching. They asked her to lead ballistic workshops, to consult on terrain planning, to rewrite sections of sniper doctrine based on her solutions. They quoted her in briefings, they used her name in examples, and still, she never raised her voice, because Bella knew, the strongest voice doesn't yell. It lands, like a shot that no one believed could be made until it was. But not everything healed. Not right away. Some officers still avoided eye contact. Some old friends grew quiet around her. Some, like Anderson, kept their conversations clipped and technical. She didn't blame them, not really. She had rewritten their reality, and that kind of shift doesn't come without growing pains. One night, after a training up, Captain Mitchell found her alone by the edge of the base. He stood awkwardly for a moment, then said, "I misjudged you." Bella didn't answer. "I thought I was protecting the team," he added, "by following policy. But I was just defending a blind spot. That made her turn. "I know," she said. And that was it. No anger, no apology demanded. Just truth. Two soldiers, two paths, finally aligned. Her father's last letter had said, "You won't always be believed. That's not your job. Your job is to be undeniable." She had lived by those words. And now, the system that tried to contain her was changing because of her. Why does peace feel heavier when you know what's coming? The missions blurred together, now sector sweeps, overwatch runs, convoy escorts. Each one a test she passed before it even began. Bella's kill count was rising, though she never asked. For it to be logged, she measured success in silence, in the absence of casualties. The lives that didn't get headlines because they didn't get lost. But even in success, she felt that something was building. A weight in the wind, a tremor behind. Or stillness, because every soldier knows. You don't get this lucky forever. It started as a whisper in command. Increased chatter in the airwaves, new movement patterns. A convoy shot it from impossible angles. One of theirs, intel analysis confirmed insurgent factions had acquired. Next-gen equipment, possibly stolen, possibly sold. Someone had found a way to match coalition tech, maybe even surpass it and worse. They had a pilot, a ghost, someone who wasn't just attacking, but hunting. Bella read every report and felt the chill crawl up her spine. The hit patterns were surgical. 3 transports taken out in 1 week, all precision, all high altitude, and all with zero trace afterward. This wasn't a random cell. This was a sniper. But from the air, then came the footage, grainy, shaky, body cam from a wrecked patrol, through the smoke and chaos. 1 frame barely visible captured it, a modified F-22. Old US frame, customized, retrofitted for single operator. Black Ops, and mounted with a long-range rail rifle. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't even be flyable, let alone accurate. But someone had made it work. Someone out there was doing to them what Bella had done months ago. Only this time. There were no rules. Command spiraled. Meetings day and night. Threat levels raised. No one had ever seen this kind of pattern. A sniper using a fighter jet? It was insane, impossible. But so was Bella once, and she knew exactly what kind of mind could pull something like this off. She studied the terrain, the attack vectors, the intervals, and quietly. She made a note in her new notebook. If she were in that cockpit, she'd strike again in 4 days, at dawn, Sector 17. Why? Because that's where they'd feel safest. The prediction was never formally acknowledged, but Captain Williams pulled her aside that night. "You really think they'll hit us there?" Bella didn't blink. "They have our arrogance mapped." She wasn't assigned to the mission. That wasn't surprising. They were mobilizing fire escorts, anti-air emplacements, fast response teams, but deep down, everyone knew none of that would matter, not against a ghost at altitude. Firing from distances even satellites struggled to track. So Bella did what she always did, prepared in silence. Mapped the terrain, calculated trajectories, modified her new rifle, and identified a hilltop barely. Reachable, but perfect. If the F-22 showed, if it exposed itself for even a second, she'd have one chance, one shot, through reinforced glass into a cockpit at 2 miles. "Don't be ridiculous," one of the officers said when the idea was mentioned in passing. "No one can make a shot like that." Bella didn't argue. She just adjusted her scope and waited, because the thing about impossible, it's always true, until someone does it. What happens when the world finally sees you the moment you pull the trigger? It was 5:12 when the first shadow broke the horizon. Sector 17, just as predicted. The sky was still blue-black, painted with the faintest shimmer of heat rising from sand and steel, and there cutting across that shimmer was the silhouette of the jet. Low, fast-hunting, modified F-22, black paint, no markings. Not official, not random, a predator. Command scrambled. The base lit up in a chorus of alarms. Fighter. Escorts scrambled late. Guns tracked too slow. And Bella. She was already prone on the ridge, 32 kilometers from the air corridor. She'd been there since 3 o'clock, watching, waiting, breathing. The target vector matched her calculations within 3 degrees. She had one window, 23 seconds. A moving aircraft. Diving at speed, partially shrouded in heat distortion. Her optic wavered from turbulence. The F-22 banked. The cockpit flashed in the rising sun. That was it. Her shot. No time to think. Only truth. Bella exhaled. Fired. The world held its breath. The bullet cut upward through layers of air and time and doubt. It passed through wind she had measured in microbursts. It passed through calculations others wouldn't have bothered to make. It passed through years of silence, and it struck, dead center, through reinforced glass. Into the skull of the sniper no one could stop. The jet pitched left, nose down, no more guidance, no more pilot. It disappeared into the desert, impact lighting up the horizon with a shock wave that echoed off the hills like applause from the earth itself. Back at base, silence reigned, until the UN voice came through. Target neutralized. Another voice. Repeat. How was the target neutralized? Bella stood, shouldered her rifle, and spoke, for the first time that day, through the cockpit. They didn't understand. Not right away. Not until the footage was recovered. Not until they saw the shot, tracked in frame by satellite footage. 1 bullet, 2 miles, into a moving aircraft. The impossible had happened. And this time, there was no debate, no politics, no plausible deniability. The coalition had been saved by a woman who was once almost reassigned to teach rifle cleaning. In the days that followed, the headlines ran wild. Dose sniper downed by coalition sharpshooter. 1 shot saves Delta and dignity. But Bella stayed quiet. She didn't speak at the press briefing, didn't pose for the photo. She just stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, eyes tired. Because this moment wasn't about fame. It was about finally being seen. She sat alone on the barracks roof that night, rifle beside her. Williams joined her, handed her coffee. No words at first. Then, they're renaming the sniper program after you. She didn't respond. He continued. They're calling it the Carlson Standard. Bella stared into the dark. No such thing as a standard, she said softly. Only what people believe is possible. He looked at her, brow furrowed. You're a damn legend now, you know. She sipped the coffee. Wind tugged her hair loose from its tie. I don't want to be a legend, she whispered. I just wanted the chance. And she got it. Not because the system gave it. Because it had no choice. Because preparation meets reality. In moments where failure is no longer affordable, and in that moment, Bella Carlson had been the only answer left. They said women can't snipe. They said logistics couldn't kill from 2 miles out. They said impossible was a distance no one could reach. And then she pulled the trigger. And silence did what words never could. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and when it does, it leaves legends in its wake.